The Passing of Grandison by Charles W. Chesnutt coming up today.
Grandison. I'm going to mess it up. Can I just call him Grandy?
If there's one person that's allowed to have a little extra slack when it comes to pronunciation, it's you, granted.
Thank you.
Now, published in 1899, let's talk about this story, because we open up on a plantation in Kentucky. And the opening line, paragraph, I need to read this to you. When it is said that it was done to please a woman, there ought perhaps to be enough said to explain anything. For what a man will not do to please a woman is yet to be discovered. You read this, right? And you kind of expect this to be a story about Dick Owens chasing Charity. But it's not really. Like, that's like the framing narrative of why he's trying to do this act of good?
Self-serving motivation to get the girl. Yeah, straight up. I love how this starts off, and at first I was very confused because I think that the title to me implied that somebody was dying, passing away.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, this is going to be about, maybe a murder or something, murder mystery. I wasn't really sure. I hadn't researched anything about it. And then we start off, and it's almost like this, I'm going to prove my worth to my lady so she'll marry me. And then it takes a hard 180 and goes in a completely different direction I wasn't expecting. And it's brilliantly done.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's an element of, like, we use the term transactional relationship sometimes in modern times, of people who are looking to get something out of a relationship. If you provide X, I will provide Y. And that's kind of a little bit of where Dick is going with Charity. Like, if I do X act of heroism, you'll give me Y act of love and affection, right? It's a little transactional, I would say. But at the same time, there's even like a little bit of performance too from, you had the servant in the beginning, Tom. You had Grandison, the two slaves, where they both were willing to kind of put on a performance as well. Right? Like, you have that old quote, be careful what you pretend to be because we are what we pretend to be, sort of thing. But I feel like there's a difference between these two that maybe we can kind of explore as we walk through this. Does that sound fair?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think there is some level of quid pro quo here, but I think that one is more genuine than the other, where one is definitely putting on a play of sorts to get what he wants, and that's Grandison, obviously, as we go through the story. But I think that I know I'm a little harsh on Dick about his doing this for his own motivation, right? But is that okay? I mean, he's doing it for the right reasons? I don't know. Let's get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it, because we open up with the fugitive state law, which again, 1850s, right? Like, that's somewhere around there. That was passed to basically say slaves had to be returned to their slave master. Like, the idea of, in slavery times, chattel slavery, property had to be returned, and this was basically a way to keep slaves, quote unquote, in line, like power to keep them in check, right?
And took away all the power that had been established in the northern states, that they were, quote, free states, because now that was irrelevant. So this was a big deal in the 1850s. So
our main character, Dick, a little lazy. Right, and by a little bit, I mean a lot of bit of lazy, because he's got power and wealth coming his way no matter what, right? Like, his sister, she's not marriageable, right? Like, so he's going to get all of the benefits of the inheritance when it gets passed down. And so literally, I love how lazy Dick is, because it just kind of it just plays throughout this whole piece. Because even like his proposal to Charity, after seeing, the inspiration of this man free slavery, he's like, okay, what I'm going to do, Charity, I'm going to free a slave. I'm going to get rid of him. I'm going to bring him to the free states, and then you'll love me, right? Again, perform X for Y, the transactional relationship. But like, one slave, man, like that's all you're going to work with. You got all these slaves at your plantation, and you're just going to work with one.
Well, you got to start small, right? He's not overambitious. I think that is Dick a bad guy? I don't know. Is he obviously someone that is, I don't want to say ignorant, but he is not aware of how really the world works. I think he's very sheltered, living, on this plantation. He has a very limited view of life. I think he's a very simple man. He wants to marry Charity, and whatever he can do to get that is what he's going to do. The least amount of work as possible, but he's still trying to do some good. So it's an odd scale you're trying to weigh here with him. And I find it comical the whole time. He's like busting his butt to be as lazy as possible, which I found hilarious throughout the story.
He really does. You can't really look at it with modern eyes, but you can't not, right? And you have those performative activists, right, that are doing things just to make it look like they're doing good because I don't know why, because maybe social currency, something, we've talked about this several times. But here's Dick to your point about doing it, and you said, he's doing good, but he's not doing it because he thinks the slaves should be freed. He's doing it as a way to get what he wants. Now, does it create good in the process? Yes, but it doesn't come from the right place. You know what I mean? There's performance in this transaction.
It doesn't make him a good person, that's for sure. It just makes it what he's doing happens to be a good thing because that will impress the lady that he wants, and he'll get Charity as a result, which is great for the slaves and for Grandison, but it doesn't show that there was a lot of good being done, that it did take some self-effort on the slaves' part to basically become free.
I'll say this too. There's some wonderful irony and satire kind of in this piece. If you didn't catch it, Charity, she says that she wished all the slaves would run away when they're talking about the opening trial. And that's kind of a little bit of irony what happens there at the end too, in terms of the slave owner, because she said that slave owner was a jerk. She wished all the slaves would run away. Right.
Yeah, I was so excited, and we've been kind of dancing around the story a little bit, but so Dick basically tries to take a slave and, force him in a roundabout way to run away so that Charity will fall in love with him and marry him. And he picks a slave, the closest one to his father. And his dad says, no, I know that one, that guy, his name was Tom, I think, was, a little bit rebellious. You can have Grandison, and because that's his most trusted slave. And the whole time, Dick is trying to, secretly get rid of him. And at the end of the story, Grandison comes back and basically steals all the slaves away. And it's brilliant how Chesnutt hides in those, foreshadowings of what was going to happen. And even though it still got me, I didn't realize that was going to happen. And I was so happy that it had a happy ending, which you don't expect, especially during this time period of American history.
So let's talk about the father, because you bring up some good points there where Tom was, when they mentioned to him, hey, do you want to go up north? His eyes lit up, right?
Yeah.
And he's going to put on that oh yeah, take me, because he's going to bust out as soon as he gets up north. I think we're led to believe. And the father knows this, right? And here's the thing about the father. There's some really interesting quotes here that I think are worth discussing. They said that, he was self-made, but they said while he despised the ladder by which he climbed, he could not entirely forget it. So he admits he understands this is wrong, right? It's one thing to do wrong and justify it. It's another thing to be wrong and to be well, this benefits me. And that's the kernel in this situation, right? And again, another quote here that I think reinforces that. The colonel would have obliged his son in any other matter, but his slaves were the outward and visible sign of his wealth and station, and therefore sacred to him. So there you have it, right? You can do whatever you want. He knows it's wrong, but as long as it grants him power and doesn't take away from his status, he's going to be okay with it. But don't mess with his power.
I love this viewpoint that Chesnutt gives us here, because I know that a lot of times when I would teach this, and we've discussed this before on the channel, is that in the South, in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, your status was very important. And your status, what you talked about many times, is all based around your land. And here, Chesnutt's giving us a little bit of a view of to the slaves, I think, and their viewpoint was they were the thing that was the most important to the plantation owners because they're the ones that worked the land. And I think that Dick's father is giving us kind of that perspective as well, is yes, the land's important to him and his power is important to him, but it's the slaves that give him that power of operating the land and having wealth.
Well, I'll say this, they know how to use that as the lever, right? So like if we're talking about if you do X, I get Y, to the father, if you give me slave, if you give me manual labor without much problem, I give you small rewards like tobacco or, like small things like that, right? And they knew that, right? Because remember when Grandison comes in, he's like, "You're happy here, right?" He's like, "Oh yes, master." Right? He's like, "You wouldn't run away with those dirty free slaves who don't have someone to look out for them, who don't have someone to free for them. They're clearly much worse." "Oh, yes, they're absolutely worse." But by the time you get to the end, to your point, he knew what he was doing the whole time. He wanted it. He's just telling the colonel what he wants to hear because he knows the colonel's power is reliant upon these people. So if he plays the role of that docile, the submissive, the hardworking slave, then he's going to get the benefits and the slack that he needs to achieve what he really wants to do, which is freedom.
It was brilliant. The long con is what he's playing, that eventually he will have an opportunity to strike, and he does exactly that. And I think that shows the compassion, I think, of the difference here of the Colonel and Dick, and Charity is to Grandison and Tom and Grandison's family, is that he is doing this and suffering and belittling himself because he does genuinely love his family, because he could have ran away, right? When he goes up north with Dick, he had multiple opportunities to run away, and he doesn't. And he comes back on his own to prove his loyalty because that's how much he loves his family. And for me, I felt like it was a genuine love story of how much a man can love his family and what he will do to sacrifice in order to help them to gain their freedom and have their best life.
Yeah. And we didn't talk much about New York, Boston, or Canada, but it's worth mentioning how funny are these scenes, right? Because there's just there's so much irony in one, how lazy Dick continues to be. Like, all right, I'm gonna walk over here. I hope you run away. Like, hey, like I'm gonna have some people write some letters and hopefully you run away then. Like, this is the laziest escape plan I have ever heard of. Just like, I took a dude somewhere and hope he runs away so that my girl back home thinks I'm a hero. Like, it's hysterical, especially when you know the if you've read the story already through, you know the irony of what's going to happen, right? So you see the way Grandison is, when these abolitionists come and talk to him when he's walking down the street, he's not turning them. Well, I took the interpretation. He's not turning them down. He's building a roadmap, right? First, we get to hear this guy's going to help my whole family. Hey, I'm going to come back in 3 weeks. I've got 18 people that are coming with me. We're going to need safe passage. And then we're going to go up to Boston. And this guy from Boston is going to help us to get up to Canada. He's mapping out his plan this whole time while playing up his loyalty, playing up his mask of servitude.
Oh, and he's building currency, right? And he's building not only that plan, but he now can go back and say, I didn't run away. I came back on my own volition. And then he's rewarded for it. And he's given a position in the big house and given more freedoms. And then he's able to capitalize on all of that credit and currency that he'd built up. And it's just, it's really funny how, Chesnutt really kind of pokes fun at the naivety, I guess, of Dick, of how lazy it was. And I love how he's like trying to get one over on the abolitionists, and like they had to have known that he was the guy that was giving away basically his slave, of how dumb do you think we are, guy? Like, everybody knows you're the one that arrived with this, slave.
Mm-hmm. So we have to end with a little history lesson that at this point in time in history, if I haven't messed up my history facts here, Canada has already abolished, at least in this part, slavery. So when he's in Canada and they call it out in the narrative, he's free, he could have gotten away. So we see not only is he cunning, but he's also, I think, very brave, because he is actually smart enough to know that he should go back with Dick until Dick goes, pays like the local man to kidnap him, basically.
Kidnap him.
So that way he can head back. So he actually had a brilliant plan for how to get back, safe passage through the states to go free his family. Dick screws it up.
Sort of.
Well, he does, because he leaves without him. So now the safe passage back, he's got to figure out how to get all the way back through all this treacherous with the fugitive state law going on and all to get back to the family. It's not safe, right? Like he did take on a brave act of getting all the way back to his family where he didn't have the easy passage that he once had with Dick.
Yeah, but I think that the story would have been different, but had, say, Dick never had him kidnapped and he just gets frustrated and gives up because he's lazy, and he says, okay, let's just go home, Grandison. And they go home, and, he would have rolled up to his house, and Pa would have walked out and said, see, I knew he was my favorite. He was good. And maybe he got a slap on the back and some extra tobacco for his pipe, but he wouldn't have been given his position in the big house. He wouldn't have been given, the perks that he was given or the freedom or leeway. Like, he came back on his own. That, I think, was the clincher that allowed Grandison to really put forth his plan of escape for his entire family. Mm-hmm. I don't think that would have happened otherwise.
Gets the whole family out and Betty with a really cute story. I would say there's a really, so you mentioned earlier, what does passing stand for? Is it the passing through of escape? When we started talking about Tom, I was thinking about passing where, you have people who are light enough skinned that are mixed that might appear as white. But I think, to me, the way I interpreted passing is it all has to do with perception and who we are. Because Dick, this whole time, was putting on this show of trying to be this abolitionist. I don't know if that's the right word, but he's trying to free one slave.
Dude.
Don't go overboard, lazy Dick.
Whoa, easy there, Turbo.
You have Charity that she didn't even really mean. Like, she didn't think he was actually going to do that. She was kind of surprised, but she did hold up her bargain. You had the Colonel, right? Like, his views, like he knew what he was doing was wrong. Like, they said that in the lines, but it granted him power, it granted him wealth, so he went along with it. So again, he's wearing a mask. And then, of course, you've got Tom, you got Grandison. They're wearing their masks of being the docile servant, when in reality, they're being crafty and cunning to plot what their right of freedom, right? So everyone is passing as something else in the story.
Yeah, I like that way of thinking about it. Again, I thought it was, passing away, but when you think of it as that Grandison is passing as a slave, he's pretending to be a slave because he is a free man in his heart, then I think that the title makes a little bit more sense. And what a beautiful, happy ending. I love this story. It's great. Gives you hope.
Another zinger from Chesnutt. What other stories of his do you think we should read? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Appreciate your time with us today. My name's Benuna. Peace.
Peace.